From the towering Wasatch Mountains of the American Southwest, we welcome you to this episode of Undiscovered Utah. This show focuses on the mysteries that surround the rugged, difficult, and sometimes deadly American Southwest. I'm your host, JB, and tonight we're going to be recounting one of the most incredible stories of adventure and survival. In tonight's story, we go back to the year 2003. It was a beautiful, crisp spring morning in southern Utah. A 28-year-old young man by the name of Aron Ralston headed out alone for an adventurous slot canyon expedition. His plan was to hike Blue John Canyon. This canyon is located just outside the boundaries of Canyonlands National Park in Wayne County, Utah. Aron was a very experienced mountaineer, and he enjoyed the solitude of exploring on his own. We often state on this podcast the importance of telling someone about your plans when adventuring really anywhere in Utah. Tell someone where you're going and how long you plan to be gone, and what route you plan on taking. We also advise that you don't go alone, and always take more water than you think you'll need. The reason we state this over and over again is because of stories like this one. Blue John Canyon is located about halfway between Moab, Utah and Hanksville, Utah. But it's closer to Hanksville and is west of the Colorado River. This is an extremely remote section of Utah that's not easy to get to. This area is often referred to as Robber's Roost. The canyon got its name from a Robber's Roost outlaw by the name of John Griffith. Griffith had one blue eye and one brown eye, and thus he was saddled with the nickname Blue John. Today, not many venture into this remote area of Utah as it is considered a self-rescue area, meaning if you run into problems, you are going to need to get yourself out of those problems, no matter what they are. There is no cell coverage in this part of the country, so you really are all on your own. Blue John Canyon connects to the more famous Horseshoe Canyon that is inside Canyonlands National Park. Somewhere around 9 a.m., Aron parked his truck at the trailhead to Horseshoe Canyon. He unloads his mountain bike and starts his planned 30-mile, one-day round trip of biking and canyoneering. Besides his bike, Aron also had a 25-pound pack with all his canyoneering gear that he would need to complete the Slot Canyon section of his day trip. Also in the pack was a little food and a gallon of water. Springtime days in the desert of Utah usually are warm, if not hot, and very cold nights. As this was just a day trip, Aron was wearing biking shorts with another pair of regular shorts over the biking shorts, a t-shirt, and some old running shoes with wool socks. It took longer than expected for Aron to bike to the chosen entrance to Blue John Canyon. After a more difficult than expected bike ride due to a very strong headwind and blowing sand. At about 2:30 p.m., Aron was 7 miles into the descent into the canyon when he came upon a feature called the Big Drop, a 65-foot high rappel deep into the narrow Slot Canyon. The canyon continued to narrow from 10 feet across down to 4 feet across as Aron continued to scramble over lips and ledges and chokestones. Chokestones are boulders that have been washed down the canyon during raging flash floods that carve out these amazing slot canyons. Aron approaches the next drop-off. This one is only about 12 feet high and has a refrigerator-sized chokestone wedged between the walls about 10 feet down from the ledge. Right below the ledge is another chokestone that is about the size of a bus tire. Aron thought to himself that if he could step out onto the smaller chokestone, then he could lower himself down and drop to the canyon floor. He took some precautionary jabs at the chokestone with his foot, and it appeared to be wedged tightly between the canyon walls. So, Aron stepped out onto the boulder. Once his weight was fully on the boulder, it teetered a little bit. He then squatted down with his back facing down the canyon and grabbed onto the boulder with both of his arms and started to lower himself down, sliding on his belly and chest over the lip of the boulder. With his arms now fully extended and hanging in midair, Aron felt the boulder start to move. He quickly adjusted his grip, but the boulder was breaking away from being lodged between the canyon walls. His instinct kicked in, and he let go of the boulder and fell on top of the round rocks at the bottom of the canyon. He quickly glances up, and all he can see is the boulder falling down right on top of him. The next few seconds played out in slow motion for Aron as the boulder first smashed his left hand against the canyon south wall. The pain was sharp and excruciating. He yanked his left arm back as the boulder ricocheted in the confined space. The boulder then crushed his right hand. The rock slid another foot down the wall with Aron's arm under it, tearing the skin off the side of his forearm. Then everything just went quiet. It was about 3:00 p.m. It is impossible for us to understand the intense pain that Aron was now inflicted with. He yelled out an expletive and tried to yank his arm several times to pull it free from being pinned under the boulder. After a barrage of more expletives, he pushed with all his strength against the boulder, trying desperately to move it just enough to free his hand, but the large rock doesn't budge. At this point, he is in a lot of pain. He is sweating and breathing very hard. He needs water. With his injured left hand, he puts the mouthpiece of his camelback into his mouth and draws in. But nothing. His camelback is empty. In his backpack, he has 1 more liter of water in his bottle. But he can't get to the backpack because of his right arm being trapped. Using his left hand, he works on loosening the straps enough that he can lower his head under one of the straps and slide the backpack down over his torso and off his feet. He can finally reach the bottle of water and takes 3 big gulps of water and pauses to take in a big, deep breath. It is then that he realizes what he has just done. In under 5 seconds, he has consumed 1/3 of his remaining water supply. Waves of panic rush over him as he knows he needs to remain calm. But that's a really hard thing to do in this situation. He had no feeling at all in his right hand, and his right thumb was already starting to turn gray. He knows the clock is ticking. His hand will die soon from the lack of blood flow, but he also understands that he might die from the lack of water being in the Utah desert. He figures he could possibly make it 2 to 3 days. So at this point, what are Aron's options? He's alone, deep in the southwest desert, miles and miles from anything. Deep in a narrow slot canyon, with a boulder the size of a bus tire trapping his right arm and hand. Listen as Aron describes what his thought process is in his own words. The voice you will hear is not Aron's real voice. It is done for dramatization purposes.
My next thought is escape, eliminating the ideas that are just too dumb, like cracking open my AA batteries on the boulder and hoping the acid eats into the chokestone, but not into my arm. I organize my options in order of preference. Excavate the rock around my hand with a multi-tool knife. Rig ropes and an anchor above myself to lift the boulder off my hand, or amputate my arm. I decide to work on the first option, chipping the rock away. Drawing out my multi-tool, I unfold the larger of the two blades. My first attempt to saw into the boulder barely scuffs the rock. I try again, pressing harder, but the back of the knife handle indents into my forefinger much more readily than the cutting edge scores the rock. Changing my grip on the tool, I hold the knife like Norman Bates and stab at the rock. Nothing. It seems every time I go climbing on sandstone formation, I break off a handhold, yet I can't put a dent in this boulder. The canyon wall seems to be a much softer rock. I settle on a quick experiment, and holding the knife like a pin, I etch a G onto the canyon's north wall. Slowly, I make a few more letters. E, O, L, O, G, I, C. Within 5 minutes, I stretched out 3 more words until I can read the phrase. The elegantly worded warning about falling rocks from Colorado's 13ers author Gary Roach. Geological time includes now.
It's now 8 p.m. Aron is starting to realize that his only real option was his third option. He says to himself, "You're going to have to cut your arm off." Aron knows that with the off-brand Leatherman-type tool he has in his backpack, that there is no way he could ever cut through the bone in his arm. So he keeps chipping away at the rock. It didn't take long for the sun to set and for the darkness to flood the canyon. When the sun drops in the desert southwest, so do the temperatures. It's a cold night for Aron, but he passes the time by chipping at the rock and making a chair out of his rappel harness and rope. He survived his first night. The next morning, Aron spends his time working on creating a rigging system to attempt to move the massive boulder. He worked on it for hours, and in the early afternoon, he took a break. It was at this time that Aron thought he had heard some distant voices in the canyon. He desperately yells for help, but not so much sound escapes his dry lips and mouth. He yelled again, this time with more air in his lungs, and then quietly listened for a reply. Nothing. Not another sound. His heart sank to a new low. It was at this point that Aron seriously considered amputating his arm. One of the items he must figure out is a tourniquet. He first tested the use of the hose from his camelback, but it proved to be too stiff to restrict the blood flow. Next, he tried some strapping he had. After several minutes, he tried to tie a double knot, but once again it was too loose to restrict the blood. He grabbed a carabiner and used it to twist the webbing tighter and tighter until he confirmed that it was tight enough to serve as a tourniquet. This was a win for Aron, but the hard part was still ahead of him. How does one go about cutting off his own arm? His only tool for the job was this 1.5-inch blade on a knockoff Leatherman type multi-tool. Anger was starting to swell in Aron as he contemplated his awful situation. He was mad and hated everything about the situation. But then he said that he heard a voice that said, "The boulder did what it was there to do. Boulders fall. That is nature. You did this, Aron. You chose to come here today. You chose to do this slot canyon by yourself. You chose not to tell anyone where you're going." Later in the afternoon of the third day, Aron decides that his webbing tourniquet is not as good as he had first thought. The idea came to him to use the neoprene from his camelback. This was a much better solution. He took out his knife and started to cut his arm, but the knife was too dull to even cut the skin. How would he ever cut through the bone? That evening, Aron finally decides it's time to pray for help, something he had yet to try. This is Aron's prayer.
God, I'm praying to you for guidance. I'm trapped here in Blue John Canyon. You probably know that, but I don't know what I'm supposed to do. Please show me a sign.
Aron lifted his head and looked up at the evening sky. Nothing. But what was he expecting? Aron starts to pray again.
Okay, God, since you're apparently busy, devil, if you're listening, I need some help here. I'll trade you my arm, my soul, whatever you want. Just get me out of here.
And just for the record, I don't recommend that type of prayer. It's now day 4. When Aron wakes up, it is dark, cold, and he is shivering. He has less than 3 ounces of water left. He unscrews the lid and raises the bottle to his lips. But the lid catches on his harness, and the bottle slips. He tries to catch it, but it's too late. What little water he had left is now spilt and gone. Could things get any worse? Aron's thoughts turn to his family and his love for them. It's while he's thinking about his family that he gets the courage to do the unthinkable. He grabs his knives, pulls out the shorter blade that is also the sharpest of the 2 blades, and pokes a hole in the top of his forearm. Then, before he has time to stop himself, he violently thrusts the blade down, burying it into his arm. Day 5. Aron's thoughts are all over the place. Thoughts of heaven and hell. Thoughts of the hell he's currently in. Thoughts of the amount of time that has passed and how much time he might have left, considering he has no water. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Aron pulls out his camera and starts recording.
I'm holding on, but it's really slowing down. The time is going really slow. So again, love to everyone. Bring love and peace and happiness and beautiful lives into the world in my honor. It would bestow the greatest meaning for me. Thank you. I love you.
It's now nighttime on the 5th day of Aron's ordeal. It's very cold in the dark canyon. Somewhat like Ebenezer Scrooge, Aron's mind is transported into a vision of a possible future. He sees a young boy running across the living room. Aron picks up the young lad in his arms, left arm, using his handless right arm to balance him. Aron knows that the young boy is his own child. In the vision, they are both happy and laughing. Then, as quickly as the vision started, it ended, and Aron is once again faced with the reality of his situation. He knew he was going to die before help arrived. But what was the deal with the little vision he just had? It seemed so real. Was he going to survive this somehow? Day 6. Aron is convinced he is a real zombie. He isn't dead, at least not yet. But he also isn't alive anymore. He is the undead. Day 6 is a pivotal day in Aron's trial. It is the day that Aron realizes that his smashed hand is decaying at a very quick rate. His frustration hits at an all-time high as he tries in vain to dislodge his arm once more by throwing his body in every imaginable direction. It is after this futile event that Aron got the idea to use his body weight to break his own arm just above the wrist. And so without delay, that's exactly what Aron does. He hears the first snap, and then the second snap. Both forearm bones are now fractured. There was nothing left to do but start cutting. Once again, Aron used his camelback tubing as a tourniquet and started the process of true elimination. It took about another hour to fully remove his hand. He was finally free from the boulder, but not free from the canyon. Aron still had to rappel down another 65 feet and had a significant hike still ahead of him. He was now within 8 miles of his vehicle. He had hiked for 6 miles and came upon a family on vacation. They were visiting Utah and had come from the Netherlands. They jumped into action, giving Aron food and water, and quickly alerted authorities. 4 hours had passed since the amputation was completed. Aron was rescued by a helicopter in a wide section of the canyon. He had lost 45 pounds, 25% of his blood. Aron was rushed to a medical facility in Colorado. Was Aron cursed, or did miracles happen? Ranger Stephen Schwanke, who led the search, said, "I've been doing searches and rescues for over 23 years, and I've never seen anything like this." He was just a phenomenal individual with an unbelievable will to live. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Undiscovered Utah, and for this exploration of Utah's beautiful but dangerous landscape. We hope you've enjoyed this story. If you are interested in more information about Aron's experience, you can check out the movie called 127 Hours. It is rated R for obvious reasons. If you enjoy Undiscovered Utah podcast, we need your help. Please subscribe. Leave us a review. Well, if it's positive. And share this episode with anyone who enjoys exploring. Please join us next time as we share more about the Great Southwest. Good night, everybody.